You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and we knew that there would be more coming out of Letcher County, Kentucky. The whole story is still not out there, but we have a little bit more information since the Letcher County Sheriff stood before the court in his preliminary hearing on Tuesday. Now, I brought you this story back on the September 23rd episode of Rise in Crime. And in that episode, I gave you the information that was being reported, but I also hinted that online rumors were circulating wildly. It now seems that some of those rumors had a little bit of validity. So here's your reminder about details from the shooting on September 19th that left Kentucky Judge Kevin Mullins dead and Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins arrested and charged with murder. Mickey and Judge Mullins were longtime friends. Before being elected as sheriff in 2018, Mickey served as Judge Mullins' bailiff. And even without that connection, it would have been hard to not be friends in this very small community. These two run in the same legal circles, and both seem to be friendly and liked by the community. Well, on that Thursday, Mickey had been reported to have been at the courthouse and even in Judge Mullins' chambers, quite possibly due to a lawsuit that had been filed against Mickey. Okay, as a reminder, here's the details of that lawsuit. A sheriff's deputy had been accused of removing the ankle monitor from an at-home arrest criminal in exchange for sexual favors. It's a form of rape, however you want to couch it. Now, those favors or that rape, it all allegedly occurred in Judge Mullins' chambers. Mickey was giving a deposition in regards to that lawsuit. Now, witnesses said it seemed the two had even lunched together that day. In the early afternoon, it was reported that Mickey returned to the judge's chambers when nearby employees heard gunshots. Mickey exited the chambers and waited to be arrested. Okay, that's the initial information that was shared in the media, and that's what I brought you on Rise in Crime. But in the courtroom on Tuesday, the video was played for the presiding judge and also for the gallery of what occurred inside those chambers. So that might leave you asking, why is there a camera in the judge's chambers? Well, it could be because sexual favors had been performed inside those chambers, maybe. Or maybe it was just county policy. But there is video of what went on. Now, I'm going to play a portion of the video, but let's talk first about that lunch that happened that day. It seems the lunch included more people than Mickey and Judge Mullins. Other people at the lunch heard Judge Mullins ask Mickey if they needed to meet privately that day. Now, that's all that witness heard. We have no further context to the comment other than it should be a private meeting. At roughly 3 o'clock that day, the two met inside the judge's chambers. According to testimony at the hearing on Tuesday, on that video, you can see that Mickey made at least one phone call on his own cell phone and then at least one phone call on the judge's phone. According to testimony given by the detective, those calls were to Mickey's daughter, Lila. And before we jump to conclusions that there was a sexual relationship with Judge Mullins and Mickey's daughter, who seems to be about 17 years old, I want to read to you what was written in the GoFundMe that was set up by Mickey's sister-in-law. Okay, here it is verbatim. My name is Ginger Isaac. I am Caroline's sister-in-law. Okay, Caroline is Mickey's wife. I am setting this donation page because so many people have asked, and this is the only way I can think of to be helpful. Please consider donating to assist the family of Sheriff Mickey Steins to help with the expenses they will encounter during this tragic time. This family is near and dear to my family's hearts. The rumor about their daughter being sexually abused is false. We don't want anyone to donate under false pretenses. Mickey and Caroline have spent their lives taking care of others. I want to help take care of them. If you cannot donate, please share this on social media. The family desires prayers for everyone who has been affected. All right, then there's an edit to the page, and it reads like this. We were made aware we cannot use this platform to assist in fees regarding this case. The funds will be used for the needs of Caroline and Lila. Now, I felt like I needed to respond to those accusations right at the top. Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't still saying it was an inappropriate relationship, and we could find out it possibly was. But as of now, it has been stated by members of the family that there is not a sexual relationship between Lila and Judge Mullins. But the facts stated in court are that Sheriff Steins called his daughter from Judge Mullins' phone, and after doing so, he stood from his seat and pulled a gun. Now, this portion of the video was played in court, and I'm going to play it now. If you want to see the video, you can find it on the YouTube feed. And there is no audio from the camera that was located in the judge's chambers, but while this video was played in court, you can hear the sobbing of the family of Judge Mullins. Here, just give it a listen.
Is that a portion of the video?
Yes, it is.
Portion of the video.
Yes, it is.
Now, during that sobbing, for those who couldn't see the video, it's a small desk. These are not grand judges' chambers. The walls are really just cinder block. So if you have kind of like a Law and Order, the TV show, and a vision in your mind of what judges' chambers look like, just scratch that. And then another thing, the sheriff isn't wearing a traditional sheriff's uniform. He is in an untucked polo and maybe some khakis. After he makes the call, he pulls the gun and shoots the judge. The judge slumps behind the small desk. And as Mickey is leaving the room, he turns around and shoots the judge again. When he does that part, he kind of has to lean down, almost hidden behind the desk, and that's when he fires the other shot. That's because Judge Mullins is on the floor behind the desk. Then Mickey leaves the room, and the video that was played in the courtroom is cut off. We do know there is more video, but they didn't play it on Tuesday. And we know that other things were kept secret or close to the vest or hidden. Choose whatever word you want. But here's just one of those things. The detective told the judge in the hearing that the cell phones belonging to Mickey and to Judge Mullins were collected and that a forensic audit is being performed on those phones. But Lila's phone has not been collected. It's a little weird, right? Lila has been interviewed, and those interviews were not shared in court either. The detective did tell the judge that when Mickey was being arrested, that he said the phrase, "They're trying to kidnap my wife and kid." And at best, that's cryptic. So we don't really know what's happening there. What about the lawsuit? And does it play any part, or was that just an unfortunate coincidence that was linked to the shooting? NPR is reporting that Mickey was not deposed on the day of the shooting. This is all despite original reports. Instead, he was deposed a few days prior, and that during that deposition, he was extremely agitated. NPR also said that Mickey's odd behavior continued after the deposition ended. They said when someone from the county's weekly paper, the Mountain Eagle, called him to get a quote about a fatal accident, something that was totally not related, it took Mickey hours to respond. Now, normally, he would have returned calls almost immediately. In some comments that have been made by locals, it's been inferred that this man basically worked 24/7 and he was always accessible. Okay, it gets a little bit more weird. The sheriff later told the newspaper that he instructed everyone at the sheriff's office not to speak with reporters until he returned the phone calls. All right, strangely, Mickey told the newspaper he had lost 40 pounds in 2 weeks and he had no idea what was going on with himself. So we have more information. We've got a really disturbing video of the murder, but mostly we still just have cryptic reasons about the why. It could be an inappropriate relationship, but the family says no to that. It could be that his wife and daughter were in danger, but detectives didn't expand on that theory in court. And it could be that Mickey was experiencing some sort of health or mental crisis. But we get that from context clues only, which can be accurate sometimes, and then sometimes they're completely wrong. We do know this. The sheriff is no longer the sheriff. He retired on Monday amid calls for his resignation. Even the governor, Andy Beshears, asked him to step down. We also know that a future court date for Mickey has not been set. He did plead not guilty, and his case will now move to the grand jury phase, which will be held in secret. So we won't get much info there either. I have joined a couple of local Facebook groups just to lurk, just to kind of follow and see what the people in this very small town are saying. I'll give you a little hint at something that might be surfacing later on down the road. Locals are saying that Judge Mullins, Sheriff Mickey, and a local pastor were all involved in facilitating a drug rehab program. Some problems with maybe honesty and money in the program are being rumored and talked about on these local forums. Once more, I'll let you know more information when I can confirm it, and I'll bring it to you here on Rise and Crime. Now, you all know by now that I live in a medium-sized city in Idaho. We have very typical chain restaurants here. So when I stumbled across this story about Shaquille O'Neal's Big Chicken restaurant and the skirmish that happened outside its most recent grand opening, I had to look into it. And Shaq, for me, is super intriguing. In a world where we highlight athletes that lose all the money that they made off of their hard work and God-gifted talent, Shaq's just the opposite. He's worth $400 million. When Shaq retired from the NBA, he was worth $292 million. He has made more than $100 million from endorsement deals, businesses, and investments, all after he retired. Now, Big Chicken Restaurant is one of those investments. Shaq and a handful of other investors started Big Chicken back in 2018. The menu fuses Shaq's hometown cooking from his childhood with new trending flavors. A signature item, Cheez-It crusted mac and cheese. We all know Garrett Moreland's going crazy hearing that. And then another signature item, Kellogg's Frosted Flake milkshakes. Well, the official website states that Big Chicken is located in 16 states and that the restaurant is also part of the Carnival Cruise Line cuisine options. And one more note about their menu. Their Big Chicken sauce looks like it might be a spicy fry sauce. And if you don't know what fry sauce is, visit Idaho and Utah. It's a staple here. Well, Shaq was present for the grand opening of Big Chicken in Heartland, Michigan last week. And Shaq can draw a crowd. The restaurant couldn't accommodate any more people inside, so the crowd was growing in size outside. Also growing amongst that crowd, the tension of those who had been waiting forever. Deputies from the Livingston County Sheriff's Office were present both inside and outside the fast food location. The Livingston County Sheriff's Office posted a video of the altercation between deputies and 3 people that were outside of the restaurant. Now, it's not going to be that great to play for you, so let me just kind of explain what happens in the video. People are smashed up against the exit to the restaurant, and every few minutes, a deputy will open the door and allow a few more people to enter. Now, I'm guessing others are exiting through a different door, and so they're creating an entrance door and an exit door. This is just me trying to figure out the video that was posted. Now, in that posted video, 21-year-old William Prato starts to mouth off to one of the deputies. You can see him waving the young man to kind of get out of there, like telling him leave, kind of like an umpire would at a baseball game when they throw somebody out. Now, we can't hear the words exchanged, but basically the deputy keeps pointing for him to exit the crowd, and William does comply, but not without the heated verbal exchange. Then, a few minutes later, as William is on the exterior of the crowd, still jawing with whomever will listen, it becomes public knowledge that he has a weapon. I'm not sure how the cops know this, but it must filter through that he's got something in his backpack. And we find out later it's a BB gun. But it's kind of hard to tell that it isn't more of a dangerous weapon. It looks like a gun. And one deputy knocks on the door to the restaurant and motions for another deputy to join him so that they can confront William. And it didn't go well. William does a kind of like a lunge fake at the cop, and the cop responds, drawing his taser. That's when 48-year-old Holly Strong and her daughter, 21-year-old Abigail Strong, jump into this melee. They were trying to knock the taser out of the deputy's hands. Two other deputies then jump into the 3-on-1 tussle, and they knock one of the women and William to the ground. In the wrestling match, William places a chokehold on one of the deputies. The other two deputies are scrambling to use their tasers, but the tactic seems to be ineffective. Eventually, the three deputies shake off the women and they subdue William. And once William was cuffed, the deputies turned their attention to the women who are still attacking the deputies by kind of swatting at them with their open hands. The county sheriff, Michael Murphy, told WJBK the following: I mean, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to let this 250-pound guy beat up the deputies for whatever reason? Well, William was arrested for 3 counts of resisting arrest and obstructing an officer, and then 1 count of carrying a concealed weapon and also attempted strangulation. Holly Strong, okay, she's the mom of this dynamic duo, she faces charges of attempting to disarm an officer, while both she and her daughter are charged with 3 counts each of resisting and obstructing an officer. My takeaway from this? Don't let it stop you from trying out Big Chicken. Their menu looks fun. All right, let's talk about this convicted felon who was out on parole and how he is now being accused of killing a handyman for being too loud. Now, that handyman, Melvin Tony Martinez, who goes by Tony, was working at a home in West Valley City, Utah in May of 2020. It's the height of COVID, but Tony's out there making ends meet. At 4 p.m. that day, a neighbor discovered that an unresponsive Tony had been shot. Upon examination, it seemed he had 4 gunshot wounds to his chest and abdomen, and then 1 defensive gunshot wound to his hand. Tony died on the property that day. Now, West Valley is smack dab in the greater Salt Lake City area, and so the story of a murdered handyman hit the news channels pretty quick. Karen Moosman, she's Tony's mother-in-law, and she told KUTV that she had seen the report of a dead handyman, but she was kind of like most people. She thought there was no way that could be Tony. I mean, how many handymen are there in an area the size of Salt Lake City? Thousands, probably. After unsuccessfully trying to get in touch with Tony, they connected with West Valley City Police and discovered that Tony had been murdered. Detectives got to work, and they soon learned that living next door to the home where Tony had been working was a convicted felon named Jesus Adolfo Valdez Jr. Police also discovered in this detective work the weapon used to kill Tony, and they linked that weapon back to Jesus' dad. Now, when they talked with Jesus, they determined that the murder occurred because Jesus was tired of the construction noise being made by Tony at the neighbor's home. KUTV jumped on this story, and through deep investigative journalism, they uncovered that the parole board overseeing Jesus had granted him freedom 3 different times after various convictions for his violent crimes. But it goes so much deeper than that. So follow me here, because this can get a little confusing. In one probable cause statement, KUTV discovered that Jesus had made violent threats to his ex-girlfriend, including a voicemail history from several restricted numbers. The girlfriend said she had answered before pleading with him to stop calling, but it didn't end the aggressive and lewd behavior. 2 years before Tony's death, the ex-girlfriend received a call from Jesus where he threatened to kill her and also rape her dead body. Then he went on to threaten to kill her family and also rape her father. He also said he hoped to be killed by the cops after he killed her children. Now, 2 weeks later, after all of those calls surfaced, and remember, this is 2018, the ex-girlfriend gave copies of more threatening voicemails to the police. In those voicemails, he menacingly told her that he was going to F her up simply because she had hung up on him during his previous phone call. And then the other voicemail was more of the same voicemails or phone calls that were filled with vile threats against her family. He didn't stop there, though. He sent her picture messages in Facebook of the handguns he intended to use to harm her and her family. At this point, his ex-girlfriend was basically in hiding. She's unable to work because Jesus knew her schedule and her place of employment. Well, 2 months after the voicemails were delivered to Murray police, Jesus and law enforcement had another disagreement. West Valley City Police served a warrant from the Board of Pardons and Parole to Jesus, who has now been established as a Serenos gang member. That warrant stated that Jesus had strangled his own mother, causing her physical injury. He had also assaulted his friend, and then that warrant referenced the threats made against the ex-girlfriend as well. Now, this behavior landed him back in prison due to him violating his parole. He clearly has a pattern, but here's where the system failed. A year later, in 2019, Jesus was back up for parole. During that hearing, he admitted to having bipolar paranoid schizophrenia. In the hearing, he explained away the difficulties with his mental diagnosis by saying he only behaves like he has schizophrenia when he takes meth. Now, despite his violent history, it looked like the parole board was going to grant him freedom. And here's how it works in Utah and a lot of other states. Before the parole is granted, the Utah Department of Correction uses an online system for criminals to verify their intended address once they leave prison. So why do they do this? They do it because a violent criminal shouldn't be allowed to live in certain areas. The public deserves protection. This system also sets up the parole employee with a verified address to aid the paroled criminal in his or her transition back into the community. Kind of keeps everybody on the same page. Now, if the address is that of a family member of the prisoner, then the family member must also fill out the verification form. That portion asks if anyone in the residence is a victim of the prisoner. This is important, right? We don't want an abuser to return to his victim. The person filling out the online form must also verify that alcohol will not be present in the home. And then another thing that must be verified: no firearms or dangerous weapons should be allowed at the residence either. Okay, it seems like a good safeguard. You'd think that, right? But in Utah and in other states, the use of this system, well, it seems like prisoners are gaming it. A whistleblower explained it away like this. They have this little internet forum that anybody can go online, and all they need is the offender's name and the offender number. So I'm going to pause right there. If you have Jesus' name and his prison number, you can be the one to go on and fill out the online form. Okay, and then the whistleblower goes on and continues to explain. This person filling out the form can say, oh, this guy wants to move in with me. And then there's no background check done. There's no agent sent out to the house to verify if that person actually is who they say they are. There's no proof other than they bring the offender in from the prison, and then the offender visits the prison office and they say, hey, is this where you're going to live? They flip their computer screen around and it's a Google Earth image or a Google Map image of the house. And then the prisoner says, oh yeah, that's where I'm going to live, guys. I want to do good. I want to do whatever. And as you probably well know, everyone knows criminals are the biggest manipulators in the world, and parole boards buy right into it. Okay, remember, that's the whistleblower's words, not mine. Also, according to this whistleblower, there seems to be other holes in the system. People do not have to supply a valid ID when answering the questions. They don't even need to supply a social security number to at least try to cross-check if the person filling out the form is actually the person that's, listed on the form. So what happened in Jesus's case? He went back to a home that had both a gun and a victim. His mom lived there, and he had been convicted of strangling her. Despite all of this, Jesus was granted parole, now for the third time, and he moved into his mother and father's home on January 6th of 2020. In his file, he was expressly told to not have any contact with his mother. Yet, because of gaming the system, he was allowed to move into her home. And it gets worse. 2 agents with the department went to his mother and father's home. They checked the address. They met with his mom, Brenda, and they even walked through the house. And they checkmarked the box saying, sure, send Jesus there. So now it's February of 2020, and Jesus has certain requirements as a paroled felon. 2 more agents made a visit to the home and discovered that alcohol was present. Jesus was in violation of his parole. The agents accepted Brenda's excuse that it was her alcohol, and she committed to not bring it there again. Okay, but remember, she's a victim of this guy. He strangled her at one point. Then in March, so 1 month later, another visit was made to the home. But the reporting documents by the two agents were incomplete. They just weren't filled out. Then in April, agents failed to even make contact with Jesus. Now it's May of 2020, and the agents made another scheduled visit. Again, the documents were not filled out, so we're kind of left to wonder if things were actually checked or not. Then just 12 days later, on May 17th, the same two agents went to Jesus's parents' home. On the paperwork, they wrote the phrase, "Jesus is doing very well." 4 hours later, Tony the handyman was dead. Jesus was seen by witnesses fleeing the scene on his motorcycle. A short time later, he showed up at a friend's house asking for clean clothes and a shower. Okay, we need to remember a couple of key details here. Police found the gun in Jesus's father's truck, and in the gun, 5 bullets were missing. Tony had 4 gunshot wounds to his abdomen and chest and 1 defensive gunshot wound to his hand. When Jesus's father was interrogated, he told authorities that his son killed Tony. He even said the phrase, "There's no question about it." He outed his son for using meth 3 to 4 times a week leading up to the killing. Jesus's father also said that Jesus wasn't working, despite having a requirement of his parole to be working. So, are you questioning why Jesus's father is giving up his son so easily? Well, it was soon learned that his father had actually purchased the gun used to kill Tony just 2 weeks prior as a gift for his son. So not only is Jesus lying to the parole board, also the father is lying to the parole board. They had even gone out shooting together with this gun. That little secret, shared between father and son, was kept from Brenda, the victim, who had been strangled by her son. Now that gun was stored in the console of the father's truck during the 2-week period. Parole agents who visited the house on the day of the killing of the handyman, well, they failed to search the father's truck, even though it was required per the policy of the department. Now, in this entire investigation, KUTV discovered 12 booking photos for Jesus. 12 times he was arrested. He was incarcerated at least 3 times in prison and paroled 3 times, and his potential mental illness was never really addressed during all of it. All right, then we're going to pile on that his parole agents sloppily conducted their monthly visits, and we now have Jesus arrested and charged with murder. And sadly, Tony the handyman was murdered while he was just trying to work and make a living during a very difficult COVID period. So how do we fix this? The investigative reporting by KUTV is spectacular. The covers were pulled off of a broken system. But how do you repair it? Now, I've told you this whole story with an update in mind. When Jesus showed up for court just last week, his head was shaved and he was sporting a skull tattoo, prominently displayed on the back of his head. And the tattoo was the number 187. And while he was standing there awaiting his sentence, Tony's family could see the ink on his skull. Okay, 187 means nothing to me. But according to Law and Crime, it references the section of the California Penal Code that criminalizes murder. So he's wearing it kind of like a badge of honor for killing Tony. And Tony's whole family had to see it. Now, during that hearing that happened at the end of September, Jesus was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison for pleading guilty to killing Tony. Jesus told the court that he hoped to get the help he needed in his 4th time in prison. Tony left behind a wife and a daughter. He was just 39 years old. All right, that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. You guys, thank you so much for joining me here on this podcast or YouTube broadcast, however you're listening. And I say it, I'll say it again, I have the best listeners. Halloween merch is still available from Ono Media. The link is posted in Murder with My Husband's bio on Instagram. Lots of cute stuff and lots of varying like graphics. So lots of things to choose from: socks, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, all of it. If you're loving the content, Please share this show with a friend. That really helps the podcast grow. I also love 5-star reviews and positive comments on the YouTube feed and in the Instagram feed. You could also like and follow us on all of our social media. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.